Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of What's Happening Now with C&I. As always, remember to comment and share this broadcast live, as it could be some information not only useful to yourself, but could be useful to others. So tonight's broadcast is being brought to us by Hello Guest Screen. Hello Guest Screen offers an easy way to personalize your Airbnb properties, TV screens with custom images and dynamic calendar-driven guest information with all essential information for the upon arrival. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Hello Guest Screen before, but I could tell you right now, I have used it. We use it here at our center whenever we're having events, different classes. We have different events happening here, and we use Hello Guest Screen, and it actually works really great. Some things that we got coming up with C&I Solutions, we do have our Christmas Smiles event that's going to be happening on the 19th at the Bob Harrison Senior Citizen Center. For those who are interested, you can go down there and sign up to get your ticket to participate in it. It is going to be a wonderful event. We got some guest soloists is going to be there. We got some great guest speakers who are going to be there. And I promise you, it'll be something that you're going to want to be a part of. So tonight in the studio, we have a special guest with us, someone who I believe that you all are going to get a lot of good information from, because I know talking backstage with him, I got a lot of good information from him already. We have Mr. John Ruffin from A Touch of Peace. John, yes. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So for me, myself, and all of our viewers, tell us, what is A Touch of Peace?
So A Touch of Peace is a counseling service. We offer a lot of different things: individual counseling, group counseling. We do seminars and some other things, but mainly the purpose of A Touch of Peace is to help a world that is always full of clutter, always full of distractions, find peace.
Okay. All right. So, I've had a lot of guests come through here. We've had a lot of different organizations, businesses, kids, young and old. When we're talking about mental health and you're talking about us having our sanity with oneself, do you find that sometimes, our community, the brown and black community, do not want to seek mental health?
I don't think sometimes we understand it.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're getting better at it. What I'm noticing is there's definitely a curiosity about mental health, and can it help me deal with stuff that has been generational? See, we've dealt with generational pains, and growing up, our parents told us to always, you can't deal with that. You got to put it under the rug because we can't let the world see us sweat.
Right.
We didn't have the right to look as if we wasn't put together. But now that is not the case as much anymore, and that we can breathe a little bit, we are considering whether or not mental health work, the work of dealing with our mental health is good for us. What we're dealing with now, what I'm seeing now, are those who don't know how to utilize it, don't know what help looks like, or where it starts, or what to expect. So they're very cautious about going. Usually they'll go when they're forced, but they want to go. They've always had this curiosity. A lot of times I'll get people coming in because they're forced, whether their spouse is forcing them, their job is forcing them, the courts are forcing them, and secretly they'll tell me, I've always been curious about counseling, therapy, but I just wasn't sure if I wanted to do it.
And, that is so funny you say that, because there's so many people out there that I've run into and I've talked with, and I tell them a lot of times, I says, well, it's good that you're talking to me, but you need to talk to somebody who does this for a living, who's got that degree, who's got that inside mindset of how to deal with your problem and how to help you out. And in your opinion, do you find that let me ask you this: why do you feel mental health does not get as much attention as it deserves?
It's not promoted well. It's not even explained. Even amongst professionals, this is a young discipline. When you compare it to, let's say, the medical field or other different types of disciplines, it's still a pretty young discipline. And so we haven't organized it the way we should. Everyone that's related to the field, whether it's social workers, whether it's counselors, whether it's psychologists, psychiatrists, they all even pastors, they all feel like they can do the same thing. They all throw everything in the same bucket.
Right.
When it isn't, it should be more strategic and more organized, where we all play a particular role that can deal with the whole person. So I think the reason why, to answer your question, that it's not as well known is because we haven't been able to articulate how to use the service, especially amongst our community. We're learning,
right.
But it has been a very slow process.
Okay, so we got a statement here from one of you, Ms. Pamela. She says, there is a stigma in the Black community regarding counseling and mental health care. Is there a stigma? And if there is a stigma, like she's saying, how do we overcome that stigma?
So the stigma that most people refer to started a very long time ago when psychology first came into the field. It was very much a wealthy, obscure type service that people who could afford it or people who live in the upper echelons would get it. And if you know anything about what happens when something is exclusive,
right,
to a particular population, especially one that most people can't reach, we have a lot of different philosophies on why. Whether or not it's evil, they have a pact with the devil, or that it's not for us, or that this is some kind of voodoo, or whatever. There's all these different stigmas that go into it for different reasons. Some so that people won't access it, won't get the help, because those who get it know how powerful it is.
Right.
But also to help explain or feel better that you can't obtain it. So I don't want that anyway, because it's no good for me. It's not really good for me. Now that has been debunked, and it's something that we don't necessarily hold on to, but still in our subconscious. And it's been passed down a little bit. So when people now are saying, hey, I don't understand it, or that there's some stigma to it, they don't know what the stigma is. At least that younger generation don't. They just know that people look at it sideways, so it feels odd. Right. I don't know why it feels odd, but it feels odd. It feels like you're judging me.
Right. So aside from someone saying, you know what, you're sick, you need to get help, you're crazy, you need some help, or you're coming with me to go some help. Aside from someone telling you that, how can one individual recognize when they need help themselves? What are some signs they can say if you find yourself talking to yourself all the time and answering your own questions? Yeah, you need to go see somebody and talk to them. What are some signs that they can figure out for themselves, that they need to see a mental health counselor?
So what you just did is a part of the problem.
Okay.
You assume that the only time you're supposed to check your mental health is when there's a problem.
Okay.
So you're like, look for a problem and then tell me, how do I identify it so I can catch it? No, Fortune 500 CEOs have counselors on speed dial, because they know that every day you are dealing with tons of data, and if you don't process it well, it can cause you to backlog. It can cause your brain to dysfunction. It can cause just any kind of issue. So one thing that should be taught to our community is that you should have, just like you have a family doctor, you should have a family counselor who knows you from childhood on. Someone that can follow you that way before you even having it, or when you have an issue, they don't have to do the legwork, the psychodynamic work of trying to figure out what happened to you in childhood to get you to this point.
Right.
You need someone, and hopefully one day we'll get to that point, but you need someone that can see you from afar off and help you navigate the trenches of life, because life is always constantly imprinting on, especially with the amount of data that we have coming in and access to information that we have coming in and that we're trying to process.
Right.
Now, to answer your question about what are some of the warning signs. So in the DSM-5, every disorder is going to have this one component to it. It has been affecting life for at least 3 to 6 months. It's been affecting your normal functioning for at least 3 to 6 months. So one of the first warning signs is if there are things that you were normally doing that you no longer are doing, or if there's things that you're trying to accomplish that you can't accomplish, and the only thing getting in your way, or one of the things getting in the way, is your thought process or your behavior, then you need to look into counseling so that you can unravel that.
Okay.
And then it goes deeper as you get worse into it.
Okay. So we got another question here from Miss Avery. She says, hello, why is it hard that our communities don't recognize that our children are in a harsh situation and they don't know what to do or where to get help? Wow, that's interesting, because you and I was just talking about children in our community, prior to the show. So
Right.
how do you address that?
Oh man, so that is a show in all of in and of itself. I'll try to be short. The short answer to that is, I think our society has gotten to the point where we're so distracted we lost connection to some of the important foundations that made that protected childhood. Childhood is unprotected now, and we rely on electronics and technology and other things to do the parenting and providing of the boundaries of life for our kids, which we know now is damaging them.
Right.
And so, yes, because we are not connected, you think about, where the traditions, and I'm doing a podcast called Our Home, and talked about the traditions that we developed as Americans. And one was the kitchen table. We used to have dinner.
Wow.
We used to have dinner at night. And we used to talk about our day.
Yeah.
And we used to be able to develop the structure of the home, our family worship.
Yeah.
Where we would talk about our principles so that the child would know how to navigate life. Those foundations are starting to crumble. It's hard to find them in our families and in our homes.
Right.
So there's a lot of foundational work that we used to have that we need to get back to and reestablish. And then we can talk about, helping our kids navigate beyond that.
Right. Folks, viewers, those who are watching, please take time to share this broadcast live with someone who can use some of this information that Mr. Ruffin is putting out, because I'm telling you, it's about to get real deep, because I got a few deep questions myself, and I think a lot of you all are going to want to know these answers as well. We got another question here. It says, if one has been diagnosed with depression and medicated, will they forever need medication? Can depression be cured?
Oh man. So I'm actually working on a theory. I'm calling it the flow of life. Yes, I truly believe depression can be managed, can be cured, can be dealt with in a healthy way. First, you got to understand what depression is. So we understand depression as a sense of sadness or whatever, a sense of sadness externally. Let's keep it like that. But what we don't know is what's going on inside. We naturally have hormones. Those hormones either speed us up or slow us down.
Right.
So if a dog was chasing me, I'd probably get a bunch of adrenaline. But if I was time ready to go to sleep, then probably a bunch of cortisol. You get what I'm saying? So our body's going to produce those chemicals based on what we need in that moment. Now, depending on how our external life is functioning, we either going to produce those chemicals that are going to slow us down or those that speed us up. And so if we are situationally producing an environment around us where we've lost interest in life for whatever reason, or we're hiding from life for whatever reason, our body is going to respond in kind, and eventually we'll start to give those chemicals that will slow us down. Now, another aspect of depression, which is physiological, maybe there's some genetic dispositions for whatever reason, even if there is no external life issues going on, but there may be something genetically inside of you that just over produces those hormones, and it's beyond just your ability to control your environment.
Right.
And so that needs to be dealt with a little bit differently than something that's more situational, that's based on something you've done or something your environment has produced. And as a professional, I would know which way to guide you based on my assessment of whether or not what you were going through is physiological or situational.
Right.
But yeah, once you understand how the body works and the chemicals work, and once you understand how environment plays an important role in how our body responds, you can definitely control, manage, and even get to a place where depression is no longer a part of your situation.
Right. Okay. All right. We got another question here from Miss Savory. She says, don't the counselors in the school go for more education and information to learn more about the mental health issues and depressions?
So if you're talking about your general ed schools like kindergarten through 12th grade, those typically school counselors deal with job placement,
Mhm.
career counseling. They're not always trained to deal with those mental health issues. And we were just talking about this earlier. There are a gamut of people in our field, right? So
Right.
we have social workers, school counselors, therapists, we have psychologists, psychiatrists. We have a gamut of different fields in the study. And some of the problem is that we've just kind of all feel like we can do the same thing.
Right.
When you're dealing with particular situations, if you were in a medical field, you would want to get a specialist. So even though you may have a general practitioner, you definitely, if you got a hip problem, want to go to a hip specialist. If you have
Right.
a brain problem, you want to go to a neurologist. You're going to go to a specialist that can address that issue, who your general doctor should guide you to.
Right.
And so you can't just put it all. A lot of times, as parents, when we don't know, if we feel like someone's in the mental health field, we just figured they should know everything and they will tell me if there's a problem. But that's why education is so important, because that person may not be equipped to tell you how to navigate that just because they're in the mental health field or hold a mental health title. You got to know what they specifically, their discipline is in. And you want to start with having a general, which for me, I'm plugging therapists. You may want to start with a general therapist who understands the dynamic of those resources, and they be kind of like your general practitioner and help guide you when there's something that's out of sort.
Okay. You had said earlier, and it was something different. You said that everyone should have a counselor, someone who's been part of their life from childhood all the way up. And you mentioned that CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, they have counselors on speed dial. I think one of the problems, especially in our community, we're under the impression, at least I'm under the impression, I don't need a counselor until I have a problem, not have a counselor to prevent myself from having a problem. So I think one would think that, hey, if I'm going to get a counselor, that means I got something going on. That's why I need to call the counselor. Not that, hey, I have a lot going on with my work, like this, and let me just talk to someone, just let them know what I'm doing, so they can help me with either breathing techniques. They can help me with, of how to count this down so you're not making as much, so it doesn't come to affect you. Or from the aspect of something like, hey, John, I just been tasked with, I have to come up with a plan to service 55,000 people in this area. I know that's going to be daunting and it's going to hurt me. It's going to be mentally challenging for me. Talk me through some things, what I can do to navigate while I'm doing that.
Right. So think about it this way. One of the most intimate relationships you'll ever have outside of marriage is with your counselor.
Okay.
So you imagine having the relationship with someone who knows you. not only knows you as like a friend knows you, but knows you in a way from a clinical point of view that can help give you warnings when you may be getting to a place that will affect you long term.
Mm.
You want someone like that to see what you can't see. We see ourselves in one dimension. You don't see yourself, you see me. Now with me, you can see everything around me. You can see how I'm dressed, my stance, my body language, my tone of voice, my facial expressions, but you can't see that with you. The only way you can see you is based off my response.
Right.
You only can see yourself in one dimension. So you want someone who can see you in two dimensions, be able to give you guidance on how you really look. That's why when you first started podcasting, I bet you had someone you would always go to. What did you think?
Right.
What did you think of my show? Because you may have done a great job, but you need someone to critique you so that you can make those adjustments. Or look at yourself to make those adjustments so that you can get better and get to a place of skill that you are now. And so that's what a therapist's job is to, for long term, to be there for you, ready to help you see yourself when you are making changes in life. Right. And and I could talk about this for days, so I don't want to take over your podcast, but that we have 5 major phases of life, right? Okay. That we got to go through, and it's going to take us all the way up into to death. So you when you're an infant, mm-hmm. You that transition to being a toddler and being a little child or kid. Then from that to pre-adolescence to adolescence to young adulthood to middle adulthood and to older adulthood. And so every one of those transitions requires you to make adjustments that I don't know how we can do without help. Right. And so you want someone that can work with you through that process.
Man, that's deep. We have another question here. It says, let's see here. She says, how do you diagnose depression in young kids, say younger than 9? How do you tell the difference in depression and normal teenage moodness due to puberty or, puberty in teens? When do we know the difference if it's just puberty taking over or are they actually depressed?
So you gave me 2 questions, so I'm gonna try to answer the severe one first.
Okay.
So if I feel like you're in danger of harming yourself, so if you see signs of not caring about themselves or caring about those around them, or maybe not caring how they are being seen or are their influence, if they are talking about negative things in life, if they're acting in we call it dark manner. Mm-hmm. So they, live in the dark. They don't want to interact with anyone. They're usually gloomy about the conversations they have. That right there is a sign that they may be suffering. Right. And they may be in danger. But depression itself can be seen in many different arrays. You can have someone who's angry and they're really depressed. Depression can manifest itself. The main thing that you look for when it comes to depression is you're looking at a person's inability to get back to a level of function.
Okay.
So what I mean by that is that, okay, let's say you have a test coming up and it is last hours, the day of, and so yes, you've been avoiding that test for a while, but now it's time to get in gear, but you still can't. That is a tall tale sign that person is going through something, maybe even depression.
Right.
And they may get angry about it. They may fight. They may try to avoid it. They're doing something, or a kid in class. Let's say a kid in class who is acting out, and maybe they're acting out because they can't see the board or they can't read or they have some deficit and they're embarrassed about that deficit. So they'll rather act out. But what they're really expressing is a sadness, a hopelessness of being able to compete with their peers.
Right.
And so as a therapist, what I look at is even when you're given the tools, when you remove all the excuses, and parents, this is key. Don't always yield to the frustration the kids give, because sometimes that's a distraction. That's them trying to keep you from seeing what's really going on. One thing I do is I'll try to give them every opportunity to be able to compete, and if they still can't, then that lets me know that there's something bigger going on, and I
Right.
start to dig for that. What is it that you're really afraid of? What is it that you're in fear of? What is it that you're hopeless against?
Right.
So that I can help you work through it. Because once you do that, once you unlock that, then all that behavior stuff goes away.
All right. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. We got another question here. Says, have your organization helped a lot of children through their mental health issues and PTSD? Well, let me, so that's a good question. Do you find kids that have PTSD? Because PTSD didn't really become mainstream until after, I think OIF won, the Iraq War. I guess, and soldiers were coming back and they was calling it PTSD. That's because of whatever they witnessed or went through over there. And now you're seeing PTSD in everything. Someone who works in the police department, or if they're in the fire department or ambulance,
Right.
or at work at, IBM or whatever.
Right.
Do kids get PTSD?
So first, PTSD is not new to the Iraq War. It actually came World War II, I think, when they called it being shell shocked.
Yes.
A lot of soldiers were coming over and they were shell shocked. They kind of rebranded it over the years, called it other things, and eventually landed on post traumatic stress.
Okay.
Now, the definition of post traumatic stress does a lot and does incorporate anyone who's experienced a traumatic event that is still causing ripple effects in their everyday lives. And can kids go through that? Very much so. I mean, even if you think about their first stage of life, which is trust versus mistrust. Erickson is a leading psychologist who did a lot of research, and one of his theories was that in trust versus mistrust, when a child between the age of birth and 3, they look to their parents to provide a trusting environment, and if something happens in that environment where that trust was broken in a traumatic way, it will keep that child from being able to navigate past the trust versus mistrust, and then they become untrusting even as a child. Some people who are untrusting of others in their relationships and so forth may have stemmed all the way back from when they were an infant, and their relationship with their parents. So yes, can post-traumatic stress be seen or start in childhood? Very much so. Kids are resilient, and so they can make these adjustments. But if they're never addressed, then yeah, it can be manifested later on in adulthood.
All right. Got another question here from Ms. Ross. She says, the Minnesota multifaceted personality inventory was developed in 1930, almost 100 years ago. Is it still relevant in diagnosing personality disorders?
Oh man, I believe so. The MMPI is what she's talking about, and it is. I see it being used every day, accurately assessing people's dysfunction. I think they update it on a regular basis. So even though it was created over 100 years ago, that's not the version we have, and I know that for a fact because one of the biases that was in that test was that it was geared towards those who was the research was done, which was Caucasian men. And so since then they've done more research and continue to do research to make sure it applies to the different demographics that that test is given to. And they have different versions of it. They have it for adolescents, so they have the MMPI-A, and then they have the 2, and they have different versions of it because they're constantly updating it and doing the research on it. But it's a very accurate and reliable assessment tool when it comes to identifying psychosis and
Right.
personality disorders.
So, one of the viewers, she talked about, children earlier, and we kind of talked backstage about this, and I want to bring it back up again. I was watching a TikTok, and it was a young lady, 8, 9 years old, probably, and she was in the Walmart store, and she was just knocking down everything in the store, whatever she can, dropping bottles, cleaning shelves off. Everybody was watching it, and from what I understand, the parent was there as well. And you can hear someone say, "Don't touch her, don't touch her," like this. In my mind, I'm ready to snatch her up. Like, girl, what is wrong with you? You must have a problem, right? But what is going through with that child, and what makes parents nowadays so afraid to discipline their children?
So for that child in that moment, she had a stage, and she was communicating to the best of her ability what she was feeling. It may not have been articulated well so people can understand, but in her mind, she was getting what she wanted. She had an audience, and everyone was understanding that she was upset. And that was probably maybe one of the few times she was able to have that moment to communicate. Now, was that a good moment? Was that a healthy moment? No. But what it probably demonstrated is that she doesn't have an opportunity or the ability to be able to communicate her frustration on a regular basis. So yeah, and most parents want to react, and just snatch a kid up and so forth. But only thing that does is it may stop the conversation. It may stop the distraction. It may stop the problem, but it does not solve the solution.
Right.
If anything, it just shuts everything down. A better option would have been removing the distractions, removing the audience by maybe taking her back to a room, and then giving her an opportunity or equipping her with the opportunity to articulate what she's feeling instead of just expressing it physically. Now, you asked another question on that as far as parenting goes. Why are parents afraid to deal with their kids? I think because parents are realizing that there's a difference between discipline and punishment. It is easy for us to punish our kids, but that runs out because eventually our kids, the punishment only lasts as long as the pain is there. But disciplining requires teaching, it requires time, it requires intentionality. And a lot of times parents don't have that in the world that we're living in now, because we're living in two-parent homes. Both parents are working. Everyone has something to do. We're constantly busy, and we don't have the time to be innovative or creative enough to address that behavioral problem from a longer stance. And so, yeah, it's frustrating for parents because, yes, in that moment, she was embarrassed. But, when she gets home, that kid is in their room with an iPad.
Right.
And that parent is in the kitchen doing whatever they're doing, and that problem doesn't exist anymore. And so, yeah, it may come out inconveniently at a grocery store because that's that only time that kid can express it. But it doesn't change if that parent doesn't become intentional about disciplining their children.
So is there a way for the parents and those out there viewing, you parents out there now, is there a way for these parents now to learn how to properly discipline their child so they understand, instead of just letting the child be buck wild and doing what they're doing, is there a way that they can get that done?
Oh yeah, I used to teach a course called creative discipline.
Okay.
And one of the things I would teach parents is one of the lessons was the punishment should fit the crime. And what I meant by that was, if you're going to discipline your kids, it should teach a lesson. So I'll give you a good example. Let's say my kid won't listen to me. I tell my kid, come here, and they won't come. They too busy looking at TV or focusing on TV. And so my punishment to them is, well, since you ain't come when I told you to, you can't go outside for 30 minutes with your friends. it may deliver a blow that the kid doesn't like, but doesn't really teach anything.
Right.
Now, check the second version out. Since you're not listening to me, I'm going to find a speech that I'm going to read to you, and you're going to not only listen to it, but tell me what I said in detailed in that speech. And then you can go back to having your freedom once I know that you are able to listen and hear me in a clear manner. Now you're teaching something. It's not a punishment. It's you correcting a default, and you're fixing it. And then you put them back into normal status again and allow them to go function, because kids are creative and they will lose touch of what's reality real quick.
Right.
They'll watch a
Right.
TV show of some kid acting out, not paying attention to their parent. And then all of a sudden they think they can do it.
Yep.
And so they're going to try it. They're going to see if it's real.
And that's when Charles Fry will lose his mind. You go ahead and try to act like Johnny did. You try it with me. You know,
they do it all the time. They do it all the time. And so we have to be intentional about seeing those deviations and correcting them. So our discipline should correct
right.
that. And I tell parents all the time, is that's what real discipline is. It derives from the word disciple. It should be a training of sorts. And so when you see behaviors, don't let it get you thrown all off or be appalled or get upset and get angry. Now it's time for you to put on your teaching mode, your teaching hat, and creatively teach them a lesson that gets them back on track, and then send them back out there again.
So here's a subject that's always been a touchy subject for a lot of the viewers and a lot of the people in the community. Homelessness. Is that a mental state? You know, what makes someone just decide to be homeless? They got to be crazy. Why would you just be homeless? You're crazy. You know, talk to me. What do we have there?
Man, you're trying to get me to be controversial. Oh man, so a lot of people are afraid to say what I think I'm about to say. It is really difficult in this moment, in this era of time, maybe not 50 years ago and maybe not 50 years in the future, but in this era of time, it is extremely difficult to be to not be dysfunctional, but to screw up life so bad that you're in that position. Now, I know a lot of people like, man, you don't know people's situations. They couldn't control the situation. Someone took advantage of them, did this, did that, all that good stuff. But our communities are so supportive. There's so much community support. There's so much resources to kind of help people. And no one's an island of themselves. A lot of times, what I come to find, I work with people all the time. A lot of times there are behavioral patterns,
right, that
people, even your close loved ones, will see and say, hey, this may end you in this direction. Let's turn from that. And I talk to homeless people a lot, and there's warnings and there's opportunities where they could have turned away from that. But a lot of times people have to get to the edge.
Right.
And sometimes when they get to the edge, it's difficult for them to get back away from it. But sometimes our curiosity or whatever it may be will get us to that edge, and it will cause us to experience things that are unnecessary.
Right.
Just to plug something in, because you gave me something. I can't just say that without really kind of explaining myself. Like I said, I'm doing this series now called The Flow of Life.
Okay.
Imagine being in the river of life, right? You're in an actual river, and you swim out into the middle of the river, and you've turned facing the current, right?
Right.
The current's coming towards you, and you stick your arms out and you try to slow the river down. What is going to happen?
It's going to take you with you.
Right. There's no way. It is impossible
right.
for you to slow the river of life down. But that's exactly what we do when it deals with life. We are so focused on trying to hold on and try to control life that it beats us up. The current is
Right.
constantly hitting us because we're so busy trying to control it. Life was never meant to be controlled. It was meant to be ridden, to explore, to go along with the current.
Right.
Now, going along with the current is dangerous too. You think about sports like whitewater rafting.
Right.
So in whitewater rafting, yes, you're going along with the river. You're following life's lead, but it's still dangerous because there's still rocks and
Right.
and things in the way that could hurt you. But the difference is you have paddles that can help
guide
you
you through there.
navigate away from the dangers. And as you see them coming, you can navigate away from. Now, to use that analogy in where we should be in life, those paddles are principles.
Mm.
See, what's happened is we've gotten away as a society, as a people, especially in our Western culture. We've gotten away from our basic principles that keep us safe in life. You know, like honoring your being honorable to your word, paying your debts,
Right.
Saving your money, being a real man, being a real woman. Like there have been some principles that our society has started to crumble. And it's like going down a whitewater raft without your paddles.
Without your paddles.
And you're going to it without those paddles, without that principle, you're going to hit the rocks along the way. We know that. So now what we've done to compensate is instead of getting on the ride, because we know the ride is eventually going to go down some rough terrain, we find a comfortable area. We get out and then we just try to control the flow of the river. Like I'm gonna stay in this river and I'm gonna control it so it doesn't beat me up too much. So I'm gonna try to, and I got a whole series on this because there's different ways we do that. We got some who will climb up on a rock. We got some who will go to the edge of the bank. There's different ways we try to control that flow so it doesn't beat us up. But at the end of the day, it's going to beat us up. Right. It's going to cause us to become dysfunctional. And that's why we're seeing the level of dysfunction get so great in our communities, because instead of living life, we try to control it. Life is meant to be lived, but we're scared of it because we've lost our principles.
Right. So we got a few questions here we want to get to. We got here. Let's see here. Says, what is the criteria for having something removed from the DSM as a mental disorder? One, until not long ago, homosexuality, gender dysmorphia, and dysmorphia, and several other things in that area that is now considered was considered mental disorders.
So there's something called normality. And norm doesn't necessarily mean fact. It just means what we've accepted as normal in our society. And so once something becomes a norm, it's no longer a disorder. And so we have normalized a lot of things in our culture,
right,
that we don't, it's up for debate whether or not it is functional or not. But because it's considered normal now, there's no reason to consider it a disorder. And so we will take it, we will remove it, and we'll update the DSM-4, DSM-5, or as they come out with newer versions based off of what we consider normal. And that's why as a society, we got to be careful about the conditioning we do in normality, where, the number one discipline in schools back in 1950 was
paddle.
No, chewing gum. Number one reason people got disciplined in the 50s was chewing gum. You know what it is now?
Probably cell phones.
Fighting.
Fighting.
And the reason that is because what we consider normal changes.
Right.
what we consider normal. You allow disrespect of teachers, whereas that used to not be normal. That used to be unheard of. I mean, your whole community would come at you if you disrespect the teacher.
Yes.
But because that became normal and it started being tolerated and conditioned, now I mean, you can't do anything. A kid can cuss a teacher out, and that teacher has no rights, no relapse, no. And matter of fact, they'll cuss you out, and their parents will come and cuss you out for making their kids come and cuss you out. And so what we consider normal can cause damage to us because normal can replace reality.
Right. Man. Hey, I tell you what, we appreciate you coming in here tonight. And hey, those who have been viewing and had these wonderful, wonderful questions, thank you for those questions. And by all means, please share this broadcast for somebody who can get some of this good information that Mr. Ruffin was putting out, because I tell you what, I've learned a lot, and I'm going to learn a lot more once these cameras go off, because him and I are still going to do a little bit of talking, and we're definitely going to have you come back to talk about, that river of life and the stages of everything, because you got me interested. I'm interested to know about how all of that works. And if I'm interested, I'm sure a lot of you all out there are interested as well.
Sure.
Is there anything you would like to add before we close?
Yeah, check us out. We got some exciting things coming. Our website is where you can go and kind of figure out what we're doing and how to reach us and how to get in touch with us. And I look forward to interacting with my community.
All right. Appreciate it, man. Thank you for coming in here tonight and sharing this time with us. Hey, y'all, always remember, your yesterday is not your today, and your today is not your tomorrow. Good night.